All right, welcome to another episode of Uncovering Joy. My name is Chrissie, and today I have repeat guest, my own teacher and mentor, Michael King, joining me for another juicy chat, this time on all things devotion, heart, and practice, with some really wonderful insight into what you can expect from his upcoming course, Hearts on Fire, that will kick off in March. It's always a delight receiving Michael's wisdom, rooted in personal experience and authentic embodiment that makes room for both the human and the spirit. So grab a cup of something yum, sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did.
Okay, round three. I think round three.
I think round three. Yeah,
I can't wait. It's always a joy, always a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
likewise. And I appreciate your time and getting up early as well.
It's worth it.
Yeah,
A good
it's not
reason
so
to get up.
early, not so early for me here.
It's always a pleasure to get up early to be in conversation with you. Um, so we've had a couple. We spoke about meditation. We went deep last time in terms of what basic goodness could be, and I feel like I feel like we mentioned heartfulness in the last one in terms of how a complete practice can be undoing and then rebuilding. But
Mm.
I'd love to, I suppose backtrack a little bit and just, I feel like as we move forwards, practice and our experience is ever evolving and we're constantly changing. And so, as you are and where you stand now, and with the experiences you've collected and where life is guiding you, um, what's your favorite thing about meditation, be that as a practitioner, yeah,
Yeah,
or
wow.
the act of sharing?
Mm, yeah. I won't, that's a big question. And I favorite thing. Okay, there's two. And this might not be like all-time favorite, but what's relevant right now. One of them is the discovery that meditation isn't everything. And that's not necessarily new. Like, to be honest, that's something I've thought about for a number of years. Because there was a time when things were the opposite, where, like, if I think back to when I was in India, when I was 27, 28, 12, 13 years ago, um, I, this is what a day looked like. I would get up, I was there with my best friend, and he'd still be sleeping, enjoying a beautiful sleep. I would get up early, 5 a.m., whatever, and do an hour of meditation. And then 90 minutes to 2 hours of yoga, and then another hour of meditation. And then in the afternoon at 5 p.m., I'd do another hour of meditation. And that was it. That was a day, you know? And then there was times after that when I got back to Australia where I'd still meditate for at least 2 hours a day, hour in the morning, hour at night. And I felt like, honestly, I felt like I had to. And it's such an interesting thing. Like there's discipline in terms of healthy discipline, and then there's what am I scared of, or what am I moving towards? What am I started to think, if I don't meditate 2 hours a day, what would happen to me? What, would I go crazy? I'm scared of what I would have to actually face. And I thought meditation and yoga was everything, and I realized this and had a moment where I thought, okay, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to meditate for a whole month or do yoga or anything for a whole month, not once, just to make sure that I don't die. Just to make sure that it's working for me. I haven't become a slave of it. You know, I've talked to so many people. So honestly, it's ridiculous. So many people who get addicted to yoga to the point where I think in my brain, something will happen in an injury or in their life where they can't not practice for a certain amount of time, just to kind of go lose your attachment to it. So it's funny, sometimes the practice that promises to release attachment builds attachment. And guess what? After a month, I was totally fine. I found other ways to practice, to pray, to journal, to live, to just enjoy. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much time in life. I get to surf and be in nature and more time for friends, more time to cook, and there's just so much more time. And I'm not here to be a monk. I'm here to live. That's what I feel is true for me in this life. I'm here to live, to be a father, to be a husband, to live, to adventure, to connect. And when I finished the month, I asked myself, all right, I can see that I don't need meditation. It's not everything. So the question becomes, I know it's really helpful and it's beneficial. So to what degree can it work for me and improve genuinely improve the quality of my life? Not ideally, but genuinely. And how can I design meditation practices for myself that support me, change me, and encourage me, not only with what I'm processing and moving through, but what I'm moving towards. And that's where, the way we currently practice meditation was born out of those kinds of questions. So that's the kind of backstory as to what I mean when I say I don't need it. It's not everything. And the more recent evolution of that same thought is this recognition that God provides, imagine I'm a gardener, provides the garden and the seeds. Did I create that seed? No. The water. Did I create the water? No. Did I create the nutrients in the soil? No. Did I create the potential that the seed naturally holds? No. Did I create the sunlight that grows it? No. So I didn't create anything, but I have a duty or a responsibility to tend to the garden, to support it to be all that it can be. So imagine your mind is like a garden. How can I support it? How can I tend to it? What do I have to do and what do I not have to do? So when I was in the stage where I was meditation is everything, I put too much emphasis on it and try to do everything myself. Whereas I don't actually have to do so much because there's inherent power and intelligence within the garden. So for example, we got a little herb garden here. And the other day I thought I should go water the herbs. And then I got out the weather app and saw that later that night it was going to rain. So I'm like, why would I water it when it's going to rain? That would be an unnecessary use of effort. So I don't have to get involved in the gardening right now because it is taking care of itself. So to what degree is my mind, my heart, my body, my emotions, my becoming, my evolution taking care of itself when I just allow it and rest versus what degree do I need to get my hands in the dirt and tend to the garden? And so that's the way I think about meditation now. To what degree and in what way, what's going to be the most impactful in terms of my participation, my participation. So my favorite thing about meditation is realizing that it's not everything and I can release the pressure and just go, let me use it in a wonderfully beautiful way that's unique for me. There's no big story about having to be striveful about it, having to be overly disciplined, having to reach the mountaintop of enlightenment because the mountaintops come down to me. And I'm here now. And the wisdom of God and life is in my heart already. There's nothing I have to do about it, but accept that it's there. That's my favorite thing right now. And then that leads into the second favorite thing when I said there's two, which is meditation provides a release of resistance so I can feel devoted to beauty, life, the present moment, God. I can feel it. There's the heartful sense of connectedness and devotion is a reward in and of itself, a sense of surrender. That's my favorite thing. It changes everything. The way after meditation, I open my eyes and I look to the world whether I'm looking at Nalu or Hannah or people walking past in the street, I feel instantly differently about them. That's what I like as well.
I love that. And
That was a long
I think,
story, by the way. Sorry.
oh, but amazing because it took us on a journey and I think necessary. And I feel like for many, I know for me personally, when that was an invitation, I felt so much relief because it was so easy to keep applying effort and more force and striving. And it kind of creates tension around the experience. So the first time I heard like what would it be like to shift discipline to devotion? So like what you were saying in terms of not having to do the most, but what's enough so that I can show up with the genuine desire. And then I heard recently, I've been listening to a lot of Rick Rubin, who's been meditating for a really long time. And it's interesting because he also stopped. And it was in the
Mm,
stopping he realized what about it was useful and what it gave him access to, but he had to stop first
mm,
to realize the difference. Um, and I love that he offered that it's not even the act of meditating itself, but the way that it changes how you see the world around you, the way it starts to refine that, which
mm,
again, that sense of beauty of being touched and moved by life. So as you felt more devotion, what has that meant for the way that you both practice itself? What does that look like? Um, and what does it shift in the way that you move through the world?
mm, mm. There's a word that comes in my mind that I'm hesitant to use because in my personal life, I would have been disgusted by this word. I had been disgusted by this word in the past, but now it's one of my favorite words, and I'm hesitant to use it because it'll probably cause the same reaction in others that it caused in me. Do you know what I mean? So the word is obedience. And my whole life, I feel like, well, my whole younger life, I felt like I was everything I did was an attempt to gain freedom through rebelliousness, probably because I was I grew up as the youngest with two older sisters and a mum and a grandma, and it was smothering, loving and beautiful, but somewhat smothering and maybe even overprotected a little bit. And everything was just like, get off me, let me be free, let me. And I had a rebellious spirit. And if someone told me to do something, I'd do the opposite just to stick it to them. And so the word obedience was something that, and I just can't think of a better word right now that would have triggered me. But when I think about devotion, and what comes to mind is using meditation to get really still. And what does that mean? It means that the surface of my mind, all of the thoughts and fluctuations that are there by virtue of the busy life I've been living, can get nice and still. And when I stop creating new reactions and new thoughts and I rest in stillness, all of a sudden there's all this space for the natural intelligence of life to be heard. It's always there, but I couldn't hear it. And sometimes the natural intelligence of life bubbles up into your awareness, and it might not necessarily be the easy path, or it might not be what you wanted. It might not even be what feels good, but you know it's right. So by obedience, I mean tuning into the highest, tuning into that inner whisper and tuning into what your depths of your heart instructs you to do, that you hear through deep meditation, or even just deep meditation, just getting still and seeing it through. So for me, even though before I was talking about unnecessary discipline, I feel a lot more lighthearted about meditation, but I feel more disciplined than ever in terms of following through with the inner instructions as they arise. And some people are like, how do I know if that's the right thing to do? you start to get a familiarity with the difference between what's right for you and what feels nice, or what is, you start to get, over time, you start to learn to distinguish the voice of inner truth versus um, egoic pursuit. And when you follow that, things work out beautifully. Things tend to have a way of figuring out in ways that you couldn't have imagined. And to make it really practical, one of the instructions might be call that person and say that thing. Go and have that conversation. Or it might be something simple like go and water the garden. Who knows? It could be such a varied thing. Or like, oh, this is a really simple example when I meditated this morning. I've been wondering, this is just a really basic example, right? I put the car we have now up for sale because I wanted to buy the car my dad was selling because it was going to do me a good price on it. And for some reason, I woke up this morning and there was just a very clear, no, don't do that. I'm like, okay, I trust that 100%. As soon as we get off this call, on my to-do list is call my dad and say, you know what, it doesn't feel right now. And I know it. And I don't even need to justify it or analyze it or explain it or defend it or understand it. So the way it looks in my life is having this word, oh, it's a bit of a cringy word, obedience towards what is right and true.
Amazing. I feel like it's the hardest thing to put words to, but I'm still going to ask you anyway. um, because one of the things I often get asked, and I still contemplate myself, is what does that feel like, or how can you start to recognize that? I'm going to say in your body, but it might not even be in your body. And so you already gave this experience with the car, but what other experiences have you had, particularly the ones where you're like, it felt challenging, the inner knowing was calling, but it felt hard to follow, but you followed it. And particularly, I think hindsight's a wonderful thing. Then we can start to see that we're either trusting intuition or the moments where we realize we didn't listen to intuition. So what are the experiences that were hard to follow, but you did, following that inner calling? And what did it feel like for you in the moment? And how have you managed to kind of somewhat catch that subtle thread of the vibration of truth?
There's been so many examples. The most obvious one is marriage. If I followed the whims of my emotions, I would have been divorced 37 times. You know, I just made the number 37 up. But it's true for all, like how at some point we have to realize that the whims of emotions are leading me around in cycles. And the emotional whims even lead people on spiritual pursuits that just go to no end. How many people get on a spiritual pursuit, but the reality of their life, maybe the relationship with their parents or their financial stability or their digestive health, whatever it might be, doesn't really change. So how many times do we follow emotional whims and it's like a sugar high? But what is it that really changes things? So we have to understand that emotions are valid and they're real, but they're also fleeting. There's been scientific studies that show emotions last for a very short amount of time if they're not reacted to. Like anger might move through us in a big wave of heat. And if there's no story, analysis, or reaction to the sensation, it nearly passes as quick as it arises. But it's the reaction to it and the story about it that sends it into a loop. And so emotions are valid and they need time and acknowledgement and support to be felt and released, but they're not the guiding force of life. There's deeper knowing that can arise on the other side of emotion. And quite often, in terms of what you say, what does that feel like, or what does that know like? How do you know? Imagine like a deeper knowing will be stable and emotional whims rise and pass. And so if I get caught in the whims of emotions, they need acknowledgement and tending to. And so I might sit with them and they'll pass. And then the whole idea and the feelings and the direction and the encouragement from the emotion passes with it. It's like, oh, okay, like my emotion was telling me I need to go do this thing, or I need to start an argument, or I need to react to my kid, or is this marriage going to work out? Or when we're traveling in a caravan, should we head this direction? But the emotion passes and the whole ideology with the emotion passes too. And as it passes, because I haven't reacted to it, I've let it go, the stable knowing is still there. It hasn't passed. It's still there. And it might be a little bit uncomfortable in terms of I had an idea of what I thought this moment would be like. I had an idea of the direction I thought I was heading in life. And this is telling me something else. So a really great example is a while ago when we were living in the caravan, and I might have shared this one with you before, I can't remember, but a while ago when we were living in the caravan, we were in the southwest of Western Australia. And our plan was to stay there, and for the rest of this was like around New Year's, and for the rest of the year slowly make our way up the west coast of Australia. And around this time at New Year's, Anna and I both started getting feelings about coming back to our hometown here on the East Coast. And we explored it once, talked about it. Oh, I don't know. And then the emotions come up of, we're here in Western Australia. Like, it's so far from where we normally live. We might as well stay here and do it whilst we're here. We've committed to this, and identified with ourselves as travelers and caravan livers. It feels like a bit of a failure to go back home. What would it mean? Like, there's so much story around why not to do it. But every time we'd get still and meditate and the emotions would pass or journal, boom, the feeling's still there. And so at some point you got to go, what's this feeling about? What's this encouraging me to? It feels hard because it's the middle of summer, and to drive from Western Australia to the mid north coast of New South Wales is going to take 10 to 12 days of driving every day through outback Australia at 44 to 48 degree temperatures with, at that stage, a 3-year-old. But the feeling was there. God, we trust you. If that's where you're guiding us, that's where you want us. If that's what's next, let's go. And it ended up being the perfect decision for all of us. And I can't imagine not come back. There's so many reasons we needed to that I won't go into now, but that's just a great example of the difference between what's right and the fleeting nature of emotions. But it doesn't mean that, see, what causes us to mistake emotions as the feeling, as the knowing, is when we suppress them. Because when we suppress them, they get locked down and stay. And then we think, oh, look, it's still there. There's the thing that's staying. Do you know what I mean? So being able to follow feeling as guidance and truth, it requires the second skill of being able to tend to allow, accept, acknowledge, and release emotions, which is way harder to do than it's easy to speak it in words. So that's the confusing bit, I think, for a lot of people. The other thing is emotions will be often like sugar highs, or they will encourage you to act in ways that is out of concert with what, like, the nature of your heart through just being you, Chrissy. It's kind, it's supportive, it's generous, it's forgiving, it's loving, it's compassionate. Whereas, like, if we're coming from a feeling of emotionality, we'll be like there'll be analysis, like, that person's bad, I need to cut them out of my life, full stop. And we'll be like, I have a feeling that, yes, I just need to cut them out now, I feel better. And what we're really trying to cut out is the grief, the hurt, the sadness, or the guilt that comes up when we see that person. We're trying to protect ourselves from what we feel. not realizing that the feelings aren't going anywhere. We'll find another person to use as our excuse to feel hurt, grieved, resentful. So it becomes our responsibility to tend to our emotions. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say?
100%, 100%. So from your years of experience as practitioner, also holding space for others, what are some of the ways that you can apply like meditation, the practices or the tools that you lean into that you found work that come well together? So I know you mentioned journaling, contemplation, so that there's a whole host of things. And I think sometimes it can feel really overwhelming, like what am I supposed to reach for? What will actually help me? So what have you found to be the most impactful in the way that we can tend to all of that in terms of settling mind, rekindling our relationship to emotions so that we can separate from how tending to them or reacting to them and become more responsive to receive the wisdom, the deeper wisdom, the deeper knowing that can often be subtle.
I know for me personally, the first thing I think of is, pardon me, is consistency with practice. And even if it's a really simple meditation, I still reckon that practicing daily for even a little amount of time consistently is better than every few days doing a 1 hour practice, because it's the habit of doing it that starts to change the habit of the mind. And so what consistency does as well is it keeps the metaphorical axe sharp. And so there's a verse in the Bible, and I can't remember exactly where it's from, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it basically says, if your axe is dull, you have to chop twice as hard to cut the same wood. So if my mind is dull, I'm going to have to work twice as hard to navigate everything I'm faced with. If my mind is dull, I'm not going to be creative or make spontaneously good decisions, and everything is going to feel harder. Everything's going to feel harder. So how do I keep my axe sharp so that everything is easier? I'm still chopping the same wood. I'm still living the same life. I'm still seeing the same people. I'm still doing the same job. I still have the same family. But everything feels easier. So that's consistency. And when that happens, the other kind of metaphor I draw from the sharp axe is discernment. It's like a sharp, clear seeing and discernment, meaning I can see that these feelings that are arising in my body are irrational and reactive. I'm not going to play that game. So let's just say that discernment comes in handy when, and by the way, I do not do this all the time, but I give myself a pat on the back when I do. If Hannah and I were having a heated moment, which is very normal in a marriage, anyone who thinks that you're not going to argue or fight in your marriage is delusional. And I think it's a sign of a healthy connection, because it means we care. And we're so stable and solid in the commitment to our marriage that we can fully fight and know that no one's going anywhere. So it can make things more impassioned sometimes. I can recognize that something's coming up, and it doesn't actually have much to do with this moment or what Hannah said. So I'll say, I'm feeling in my body right now a lot of anger, and I know that's not on you, but I'm going to say something I regret. So I'm going to take myself away, find a way to calm down, get some perspective, and then can I come back and we talk about this, properly from a place of wisdom? That comes from discernment. Whereas if I'm undiscerning and my axe is dull, I cannot see the difference between me, the awareness, And the anger that's here, I'm in it. It's wearing me. It's a suit that I'm in. And I am being anger wholeheartedly rather than recognizing that it's arising. And so I think the first thing that helps is the discernment, the sharp axe that's born out of consistent daily practice, even if the daily practice is not monk worthy of 4 hours a day, even if it's 10 minutes. The other things we can do is it's become a practice over many years to learn to allow emotions to run their race. And we have practices for this that you share and that I share. We call it ease meditation, which is finding ease amongst turbulent emotions. And it's an acronym, and we can go through that another time. But learning to allow is the key thing. So if I know emotions, if they're unreacted to, are impermanent, then there's been times where I've felt anger in my family unit, either towards Nalu or Hannah, and I've come in this office and I've shut the door and I've sat on this little daybed thing here, and I've gone, hello, anger, and sat down and closed my eyes, and I've gone, how does anger feel in my body right now? And I got to be honest, Chrissy, you know this, it's uncomfortable. It feels easier to enact anger and get up and I want to punch a door, or I want to scream, because as it's coming up in my body, it's getting stronger and stronger, and it feels like heat that's trapped, and it feels turbulent, and my head will get hot. And if I can sit perfectly still and watch the display of anger, at some point, it goes like this. And I'm like, where did anger go? But it puffs away in accordance with stillness and the depths of allowing. And every emotion has a different physiological quality. Anger is the quickest to rise and the quickest to pass, for example. And sadness is slower to rise and slower to pass and won't have such a distinct popping point. It'll have a slow fading out. And then there's deeper emotions like grief that are like waves that come and go for a much longer period of time. They're all different, but nonetheless, the real skill, and this helps with discernment as well, to be able to sit down and practice allowing. Can I allow the sensations and the stories to just be exactly as they are? And can I watch them and see? This is a question I ask myself. What do they do, the emotions and the stories, when I just sit back and watch and do nothing? How does grief or resentment or resistance move through my body when I stop and just watch it? What's its nature? Like, can I be curious about that feeling? And a lot of people don't want to do that because it will feel worse before it feels better. So if I get genuinely curious about sadness, if I really look at sadness, it'll get stronger and I'll probably end up buckled over crying. But then if I'm fully allowing it to move through my body, and even if I'm convulsing and crying, there's a moment where it passes. And I would way rather 5-10 minutes of more pain for the rest of that day and the days to come feeling a deeper level of connection and peace than living numb because I'm too scared to feel. So discernment, allowing, and the courage to feel, I think, are a couple of tools that we can all take into or apply to this thing of letting the nature of impermanent fluctuating emotions pass so we can be more deeply connected to what the truth is. Like, and if we do the opposite and don't allow and don't release, and we're on the whims of emotions, imagine if you believed in every thought that passes through your mind. Like, you've been in relationships. Imagine all the things that you thought about Jack that you never said. Imagine if he knew the things, and not only imagine if he knew, imagine if you did them. You'd be in jail. But then a lot of the time the storm passes and you're back to, I can see, not even I can see, I am love for this person. Or you just, whatever it is, see more clearly, know the truth, know what you need to do.
That made me laugh. So true. I'm sure I can't even remember half of them because in the peak of anger, it's just like a torrent of thoughts.
And imagine, if we'd killed everyone we thought about killing.
Wild.
So we have discernment to some degree. We all have it. We have the ability to not believe in what we think. And it's just taking what we already have and letting it move into deeper and more subtle thoughts. Because the problem with that, there are thoughts we do believe in that are harmful to us. So can I take the same discernment of not having to believe in that in my thoughts to the ones that I'm currently identified with that aren't serving me?
Mm.
So I can see them more clearly.
And it's so, I always love hearing you speak about this because it sounds so simple, but the experience of it is still challenging. And so I'd love to know, like, this is one of them, like having the courage to feel what's sometimes really uncomfortable in the body, which I suspect the more familiar we get with them, the more we can allow. But you've had many years of holding one-on-one space for people in terms of this sense of like becoming more alive and using the practices of meditation to enable that, as well as teaching on teacher trainings. What do you feel like are some of the standard struggles of a human being? Because I find this is interesting too. When we hear and we can relate, and we're like, oh, okay, this is actually, it's not just me. I'm not mental. This is a normal experience that many go through. There's a relief in that I think can create the softening so that we can tend to it. So what are the common obstacles that you see in humans that we're often faced with in the way that we limit our experience of life?
Yeah, really great question. Probably the most common one would be projecting the past onto the present and the future. And it's a really obvious one, right? But like, I had a great one-on-one session with a wonderful young lady yesterday. And she had all this trouble in her past, in school in particular. And when she was having trouble in schools with verbal and physical abuse, and it's just so intense to hear. And it makes me go, okay, now we're definitely homeschooling Nalu. But like, so intense to hear, right? And when she was young and she told her mum, her mum said, just fly under the radar. Which, everyone's doing the best they can with what they got at the moment in the time, everything. We all know that, right? But and so a strategy was developed to maintain a human need, which is safety and security. So a basic human need is to feel safe, and we'll develop any kind of strategy we can to create it. So for her, it was do not stand out, do not be singled out, do not raise your voice, do not get noticed, do not stick your head up above the crowd because it'll get chopped off. And so then this lady's a young adult and is wondering why she was having trouble getting swept up in the joy of the present moment without a thought coming in that would take her out of the moment and make her shrink away. And for the kind of work she's in, it's very important that she has a sense of confidence and does stand out. So we start talking about it, and we end up addressing the present moment. Like, how do you feel? What's going on? When do you notice this happens? Like, what's the habit? And then we end up revealing this whole pattern. And even though it's from the past, it's present now. So we're not digging through the past, it's active now. And, if a wave breaks on the shore, it stirs up all the sand and the shells, and everything gets stirred up. So we start talking about it, and the program's been there and it's been active, but it's stirred up. And that's a good thing because it's unstable. So that's the beauty of mentoring. What is stable, not in a good way, but like stagnant, gets stirred up, and you get to talk about it and you get to unpack it, get to move through it. And then all of a sudden we can recognize that I can see that even though this thing's annoying, like, why do I do this to myself? Why do I make myself shrink away? This very well-meaning strategy, I did need it. I'm not going to lie, I needed it to get through that situation, is now holding me back. And we make this choice. Do I still need it? No. Is it still true for me? No. Do I want to feel like this? No. And whilst it's stirred up, it means the mind is receptive. So not only is the stagnant program uprooted, if we went from there and just did nothing, it would probably settle in the same way. But that's the perfect moment to go to town implanting new programs that, not to try to force out the old, but that accurately represent the joy of the new, and to stabilize them because they're real and true for who you are, not who you were made to become through your environment, but who you always have been. And so the biggest thing I see is probably we all do it, the past, unconsciously playing out in the present until we have the discernment to go, well, maybe there's another way to be able to do this. Maybe there's another way to be able to work, relate to money, deal with emotions. Maybe there's another way to think about the world. Maybe there's another way to parent. Doesn't have to be a replica of the shitty way I was parented, for example, you know? That's probably one of the most common challenges, I would say. The other one is just how busy life is. It's when we are stimulated, we cannot be fully aware. And I'm saying this through my own experience. This is not me preaching from the mountaintop. This is me in humanness, because I have a tendency to get very caught up in stimulating things. And so here's my example of that. As you know, last year, halfway through or a third through last year, we miscarried. And it was a really hard time. And I thought I'd processed it. And Hannah's processed, because it was so much more lived for her. She felt it. It was in her, was obviously going to be more drawn out, more intense for a variety of reasons, right? But I thought I dealt with it. But I didn't realize at the time that I was a little bit running on fumes and couldn't even feel the depths to which the grief was still in me. And this, the more the grief was there, the more I prided myself on being busy to distract myself from it. And at some point, luckily, something guided me to, including Hannah pushing me out the door, guided me to go on. As you know, I love to go off on walkabout, just take myself into the bush by myself, just take a little tarp and sleep on the earth and cook on the fire for a few nights. And it's like my favorite thing to do in the world. And I even went out camping, and the plan was like I drove a couple of hours up the coast, and then I got there in the late afternoon. So I was going to sleep next to the car, then leave the car and go on this walk up the coast to a secluded camp the next night. So the first night when I pulled up to sleep where the car was, some rain came. And I even rang Hannah and said, "Oh, the weather's bad. I think I'll just come home." Like everything within me was trying to get out of what I didn't even know was coming. And then eventually she was like, "No, don't you dare come home." And I'm like, thank God she had some discernment, because she'd actually been doing the work. "Don't you dare come home." And so the next morning I packed up my tarp and got in my backpack and walked up the coast. And when I got to this place, that's a really beautiful, special place to me. I just got there. I arrived. I saw where I was camping. I just got there, and it was like a lightning bolt struck and pierced the cloud, and the rains poured. And I just fell to my knees and bawled and sobbed for so long. And just all this grief came out. And I was like, I did not even know this was in there. I didn't even know. And not only that, when I looked back, I felt I could see that I'd been not as supportive to Hannah as I should have been, because I was removed from my feelings. I was distracting myself and from life and all of my responsibilities. And so that's my example of what I love, why I love to be a mentor and a coach, because I'm not caught up in the story of another person. And unfortunately, I didn't have a mentor at that point. I often work with mentors and coaches, but at that point I didn't. And I'm not in that person's story. And I've just, through years of practice, get a pretty good read on people, even if I don't get it on myself in situations like that. And so I can come in with the same discernment that Hannah had towards me, which is, "No way you're coming home. Go." And help people be aware of what they can't even see is holding them back. Just through curiosity, questioning, observing their life, all those kind of things, you can start to get a sense of what might be going on for someone that they don't even fully recognize at the moment. The best sessions in one-on-one work are always when people say, "I don't know what we're going to talk about today." They come with an idea, we unpack it and process it, move through. Sometimes people tell me before the session they have a thought, "But I got nothing going on. I don't know what we're going to talk about." And at the end, they're like, "Oh my God, I did not know that we were going to go there. I thought we're going to get to talk about something positive and joyful today because I had no shit going on." But it's always because it's just an open thing where you can just be with exactly what is as it is, be with the present moment and see what's truthfully here, what's truthfully going on. So that's a big challenge for me and a lot of other people. We can't even see what we're so in. We can't even see what's actually ruining our experience. So I came home from that camp and I just sat down with Hannah and I said, "I'm so sorry. I," and she's like, "Yeah, you fucking bastard. You should be." I said, "Thank you. Come on. More, you should say that." Because she was like, "Yeah, where you been for a few months?" I tell you what though, the thing that she liked about it is that when I'm in a state like that, I I become a clean freak. So she's like, she loves it that I was feeling better and being more supportive and present, but she's like, "Can you keep the house cleaning thing going?" So they're probably two of bigger chat, like deeper challenges, and then there's a lot of beautiful work with one-on-one stuff too, like growing the good and helping people actualize whatever their dreams are and all the beautiful side of it. But in terms of challenges, they're probably two of the bigger ones that we see and face and work on.
Thank you for sharing that. I really felt that in my body.
Yeah.
And it's so amazing. What I really liked about that is we can have all these tools and use them to great impact, and sometimes we need to be held. Because it is difficult. And like you said, like life is so fast paced, and I have exactly the same tendency, particularly around things like grief, where I get busy because grief to me feels almost like a tsunami. I feel like I'm going to be swallowed by it.
Fully. Yeah.
So I really relate to that. And I feel like the two almost feed into each other, because the more we're moving, the less we can be aware of how the past might be impacting our current reality. So I really love that too, because I think it's something, until we are invited to even consider that. Like when I wasn't considering that, I never saw the ways. And then once someone invites you to see that, I was seeing all of the ways, which are also uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so hard to change that? Or how can we be aware? Like, how can we catch those moments that signify the past is playing its role in the present?
Mm. Mm. One of the ways I reckon is being more passionate about thriving, because if we hold ourselves to a higher standard, and there's a lot of pressure in this world, so I'm not saying it to put more pressure on us, but just decide the kind of life we want to live. Then it becomes more apparent. If you're letting yourself just be numb and go with the flow and overly fluid, whatever you're feeling or whatever's happening, it's just like, it's all just a big part of the same aloof blob. But if you hold yourself to a higher standard and decide the kind of life you want to live. So for this client yesterday, the life was, I want to stand out. I want to share my heart. That's a new standard for her. Because she moved towards the new standard of living, all of a sudden, everything that opposes the new standard starts to rear its head to say, are you sure? Don't come back here. It's risky. So one of the things we do in mentoring is, because it can be hard to see the forest from the trees, it can be hard to recognize the way the past shows up, is paint a picture of a new standard. Paint a picture of the life you want to live, because as soon as you look in that direction and start to move towards it, you don't have to dig up the past. You don't have to go searching childhood traumas. As you start to move forward, anything within you that contradicts who you say you want to become will start to rear its head naturally to be released. And so that's one way of explaining it. The other way is when you set yourself a new standard, decide the life you want to live. I want to feel good. I want to be thorough. I want to be loving. I want to be caring. I want to be non-reactive. I want to be able to support whatever it might be, however you want to live, right? Anytime something comes up that does try to hold you back or limit you or contract you or make you small or make you shy away or make you judge, make you feel ill about others, then you can decide, okay, this isn't me and what's true for me. So there's a good chance it's a past reaction coming up to try to protect me. So let me look at it. Don't accept it as who you are. Accept that it's here now, fully accept that it's here, and I need to tend to it and acknowledge it and understand it to move through it and release it. So accept that it's here, but do not accept it's who you are. So acceptance has two faces. One of them is accept what is here, because resisting it will only make it stronger. The other face of acceptance is, can you accept? And you'd be surprised how true this is for us. Can you accept that you are a daughter or a son of God, of the divine? Can you accept how brilliant you are? Can you actually accept that? Can you accept that there's nothing you have to do to earn or be worth love? Can you accept it? And that's, believe it or not, that's, even if it's an unconscious thing, that's the side of acceptance more of a struggle with. So setting a new standard, deciding the way you want to live and what your life could look like can really help in those two ways. To recognize the stain of the past that is within us. And it's also,
Beautiful.
you can, if you have an enormous reaction to a little thing, it's quite often a pretty good indicator, you know, like, and especially when you're in a close relationship, you see this, where Hannah might say something that's not necessarily too hurtful and not a big deal, but my body just comes alive with feeling. And I'm like, that's a pretty good indicator. If my reaction's this big and the action or the word was that big, it's a pretty good indicator that's got nothing to do with the word or the action. Or the opposite's true too. If I put something back in the wrong spot, or, you know, if I finish an item of food without telling Hannah or considering her, and there was a big explosion, and we might realize that it had something to do with the past and the fact that her brother used to steal all the orange juice and she would never get now any, or something like that, you know. And not to say that I shouldn't have thought of her, but we can always recognize that, okay, there's more going on than what's here. And the opposite is true too, in terms of if there's a really big situation that warrants a reaction, warrants something significant from within us, and it makes us freeze or turn aloof or avoidant, that's also a pretty good indicator that the past is putting a stain over the present. You know, yeah. An example
Amazing.
of that one might be if something happened to Nalu and it required me to step up and be a protector as a dad, and I turned it on him and said, well, you shouldn't do that. Come on, let's just walk away and ignore it. Then that could be something from my past around fear preventing me from reacting appropriately to a situation. So that's another good way to recognize the hugeness or the lack thereof reaction balanced to what life's presented.
I love that you gave the contrast between the two, because I recognize that I definitely have freeze often. I'm kind of like, I pull inwards and hide. So it's good to know the two sides of how we can feel that coming alive within our present moment experience. It sounds so big when you express it that way. Like, I feel like we're all always going to be carrying something, and there's always some level of tending to the garden, like you said, so that we can thrive. I love that that's what you offered. Just want to thrive more, which is sweet, because that the way that looks can be different for everyone. So in contrast to the common struggles and kind of connected to, what are the common yearnings or the longings that you've seen that are kind of intrinsic to just being human?
You know this Rumi quote? I might get it wrong, but you'll get the idea of what I mean. I had 1,000 desires, and then I saw your face, and now I only have one. You know? And one of the things I feel like I get the blessed fortune of doing with the people that I attract in mentoring work, the people that I get to work with, is there's a lot of coaches and mentors who are like accountability coaches, goal setting coaches, mission oriented coaches. And it's not me. It's just not my nature. Mine is the actual opposite, where how do you step outside of an achievement oriented life, a goal focused life, and find a life of meaning? And meaning is found when we find that one face, whatever it means to us. And everything flows from there. And we might call it a million names, but every human has a God-sized hole in their heart that can only be filled with the puzzle piece that fits it. And, you and I are in this world of meditation, yoga, spirituality. Look how many seekers there are. And so that's what we're really yearning for, even if it's appearing as 1,000 different things. And the cool thing is, what I see with this kind of work is, from the place of connectedness and heartfulness, you'll still move towards achievement and goals, but you won't need them. And you'll recognize who created the garden and the pleasure and the joy you get to tend to it, where it's not your responsibility, it's a joy. It's not something that you have to control. It's a dutiful privilege, and from that place also, I realized, in terms of my analogy of tending to the garden and not having to water it when it's going to rain, so much of the work with the past can be undone effortlessly. Like this whole thing of unpacking, we call it deconstruction, like disabling the structures of the mind. And there's a passive and an active side to deconstruction. The passive side is when I get myself in a certain state of stillness and calm and devotion and receptivity and surrender, so much of the garden tends to itself, just by virtue of this incredible psychophysiological system that was created with pure divine intelligence. So much of it tends to itself. Just like, a really obvious example is when you fall into REM sleep. What's happening in that sleep is your body is unpacking and unloading accumulated stress. So when you fall into a certain state of meditation, a certain degree of the accumulated stresses and past that lives within you will unpack itself to the degree we can surrender and allow. So there's no point in searching for the past and unpacking it if I don't need to do anything about it other than just be. And another aspect of that is the beautiful side of devotional prayer. There's certain things I can hand over, and just the act of handing them over, they can take care of themselves without having to go digging, without having to do anything. There's so much intelligence and power inherent within life that can be supportive and is supportive in its very nature. And then there's the active side, which is there's something within me that's attached or clinging or sticking to this pattern. So I need to actively look at it and apply a tool to deconstruct it. And that's when you'll get out your little gardening shovel and go dig up the roots, because they seem to be stuck around a rock. And so there's no point in going to dig if you don't have to. And so the work we do, or, I do, whether it's in meditation or in mentoring, is recognizing that fine line between what's worthy of our time in terms of digging and what will happen just by virtue of daily practice. So much of it takes care of itself. Yeah. So I can't even remember what the original question was, or if I answered it. But the yearning, yeah, cool, yeah, the yearning. I know that's what I yearn for and still yearn for. Like, the thing that led me on a spiritual path in the beginning in my early 20s, and I can even recognize in my teens and even younger than that, was just an ache for God. I feel it in my heart. I want to know you. It's always been there, and I love it. It's the thing that's led my whole journey. And it's the thing that's made me recognize how much effort we apply in life trying to fulfill the hole that only that puzzle piece can fill. And they are temporary highs, but at some point we've got to get off the hamster wheel and go, what's really going on here? Where's true meaning at? And once I've got true meaning, whoa, the whole way I move through the world is different. I'm not restlessly seeking and striving, calmly acting, co-creating, and rejoicing. And if I can do my part to help people make that shift or transition from ambition and achievement to meaning, then that's what I love.
Just yum. I really, I really, I really recognize that, and I was obviously blessed to work with you on a one-to-one basis too. And I love that hole in the heart. I think about, my previous experience in the journey. Like, I always felt like something was missing, and that's what kept me searching. And there's something so profound about this practice, but also the practices that allow us to connect to something deeper. And I like this idea that it will take care of itself, because I found that too. I'm someone who likes to really over effort. So just it's a relief. I found there was a Sally Kempton book, and she said the awareness that catches the habit that makes you want to kick yourself across the room, something like this, is the same awareness that will allow you to transform it. And I just, it's so sweet. It's like just coming back to that experience that already connects you to something deeper. And you use the word connection and heart, and that's kind of where I'd like to inquire into next. How does that help us? How does the sense of connection, and for me it's felt like coming back to the heart, where the mind can kind of come and meet the experience or feeling of my heart. How does that help us find that one face?
I feel like it's the picture I haven't thought about this before. That's a great question. But the picture that I immediately got in my mind was been to different parts of Australia. I've been to some incredible places where there's caves, and there's indigenous paintings on the walls of the caves that have been there for thousands and thousands of years, that capture and represent the deepest spiritual journey and meaning behind the lives those people lived. To walk in there and feel it is truly something special. Still see the paintings on the walls. That's the first picture I got in my head. And what it made me think was that in the depths of our heart, and not our broken heart, we often mistake the egg shell for the egg. We often mistake the feeling of brokenness or vulnerability or emotional embodied aspect as the heart itself. Whereas we're all led for one reason or another to put a bit of a coating, it's the great metaphor that the heart is behind the ribs. And when we, I guess, do the work to let ourselves be fully engulfed by our own heart and sink into the deepest aspects of the heart, that one face is already imprinted on the wall of the cave. It's there already. Like it was a stamp on a cow's hide when they're a calf to say who owns it. God was like, I own you. You're mine. And I hope one day you remember where you came from. And I'll put this stamp here, this impression here. And it's a lure. And it's right that as you go live your human life, you will feel something's missing until you remember. That's part of the design. It's a lure. And if you don't heed to the calling, you'll suffer. To the degree you heed and come, you'll feel better. And when you live with a full knowing of whose you are, you'll effortlessly thrive. That's what I sense. That was the first picture that popped in my head when you asked the question.
So beautiful. I really feel that. And I love that that was the image that came to mind, because I think it kind of mirrors that sense of when you were talking about the way that we can move through life shifts. So we're still doing the things that we're doing, but the feeling behind them changes. And I sense it when that thing feels missing. At least for me, the way I moved was from that sense of lack. That's why I was searching. That's why I was striving. And in the remembering and the constant remembering, the constant choosing to sit and remember again and again so it becomes familiar, I can engage in exactly the same things, maybe with different choices, but the feeling of fullness comes with me. And that's, I think, why life starts to feel beautiful and why I feel more moved by it. So such a beautiful image that it's imprinted there and it's something we come home to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for asking that question. It made me consider it, which was a beautiful thing too.
It's stunning. I love that it was a cave as well, because that's how it feels quiet and somewhat like dark, but in the womb, in the best place.
Yeah.
What does this look like? So I know you've got a course coming up called Hearts on Fire. What does what we've spoken about look like within that offering, and the desire to birth this new offering, to bring it forwards, to share with the world?
That's so funny. I haven't thought about this until now, but the Indigenous people of Australia considered caves to be the womb of the mother. Not all caves, but they had their significant caves, right? And like you say, you said it's like being in a womb, and obviously it's a burrow directly into the earth. And they would often retreat into caves to have certain spiritual experiences or gather and receive spiritual knowledge. And one of the more significant moments in my development and life was when I was about 25, and I was chatting to an old Indigenous fella, and he told me to go to this certain place and find the cave there and go sit and meditate in it. And I went into this cave and sat up the back of the cave, and it was a coastal cave. So, kind of imagine sitting on the sand in this cave and looking out through the eye of the cave to see ocean and beautiful blue sky. And at the back of this cave, I took sticks in there and lit a fire. And it was indicative of what represented rekindling a fire in the depths of my own heart to live from. and this whole metaphor came alive within me. What's it like to see the world through the eyes of a fire within the heart? What's it like to be lit up? And if I see from, perspective determines perception. Where I see from determines what I see. What would the world look like if I see through the eyes of a lit up heart? And that's kind of what I learned from that time. And since then, I've ebbed and flowed, have lots of moments where I experience that, and then I deeply fail, and that's human life, right? But it's such a cool image for me to always remember and come back to. So that's kind of not that I'm going to take everyone in the course to a cave and light a fire in it. Although I'll tell you a quick something on the side. When I first started running meditation teacher trainings, the very first 3 or 4 rounds that I ran were one-on-one. That's how I originally started it. And it started as it involved a retreat at my house. And there was 2 lads that were doing it one-on-one, but they both came at the same time for the retreat. And I took them to that cave. We lit a fire in that cave, and I told them a similar story. So, it could happen. But yeah, the course we're going to run is an online course, so that won't be happening. But the intention is to arrive at that kind of inner heartfulness, lit upness, hence hearts on fire. But the way we get there is through using meditation to do the very simple and practical work in our life. We don't arrive there by having spiritual idealism or escapism or bypassing. Very, very practically applied. And so this is why, even though it's called Hearts on Fire, the subheading is the therapeutic application of meditation and contemplation. And so my question has always been, if we're going to take the time to meditate and sit down and close our eyes and take a moment out of our precious day and our precious time, because life is for living, but if we're going to just pause it for a moment, I want to use that time wisely to address the reality of the situations that people have going on. So we want to explore, how can meditation soothe that reaction that you have when that person says that? How can meditation support you when you're defensive and you shut down because of that trigger? Or when your ego wants to be self-righteous? How can meditation support you when that emotion comes up to be able to understand it, allow it, and release it? How can meditation support you to go from dysregulated to regulated? How can meditation support you to recognize the truth of what's important to you and wire your brain so it's acclimated to your truth, so there's not a separation between mindset and heart truth? How can meditation support people to be able to address whatever's going on in their life and just make it even 1% better, if not much better, but at least even 1%? And so that's the specific application of this course. And like you said, Chrissie, we've been running meditation teacher trainings for years now. We took a pause this year because I want to share this stuff, this very practical on the ground stuff, with not only people who want to become teachers, they're also invited, but the general person who has an interest in meditation and has an interest in using it to make life better. Yeah.
Incredible. Something I like, so I had a little look at the journey, and something I really like in terms of where it looks like you're leading people is there's a very skillful addressing of the mind, but I like seeing at the end you've got like heartfulness 1, heartfulness 2, heartfulness 3, heartfulness 4. Can you tell me a little bit about the concept behind that?
Yeah. Well, in the meditation teacher training, where there's so much I felt like we kind of quote unquote had to cover to be thorough and well-rounded and make it a kind of teacher training, including like traditional aspects from this lineage and this from here. And when we're talking about reconstruction, like this practice and the self-programming and all these different things. And heartfulness, the last 2 modules of the teacher training were heartfulness, but it always felt a little rushed. Like I just wanted to be there for longer. And so this course being called Hearts on Fire, I'm like, I'm just going to, be completely transparent here, I've like got an idea of what those sessions are going to hold. Like I've kind of had to write a curriculum, but I'm like, I also just want to leave 4 whole sessions for heartfulness, and just there's a few ideas, but mostly I know they're going to fill up, and the best stuff that's relevant to everyone who does the course is spontaneously going to arise. I know that. So there's certain aspects of heartfulness, like looking at what's heartful, surrender. How do we grow positive emotions in the heart? How do I light the fire within my own heart? And what does that even mean? What's affirmative prayer from the heart? And how does that actually impact my life and the lives of others? All these kinds of questions that'll get answered. But also, there's so much in not teaching anything, but resting awareness in the heart and just being there and seeing what happens. So time and space for that. Just being in the heart and seeing what happens from there. So yeah, there's a real thing moving through all this mind stuff. And then, yeah, when the mind is calmed and soothed and regulated, and some of the programs that have been leading the mind are disabled, that the place awareness naturally wants to return to is the heart. Because when we stop efforting and trying and struggling, that lure of the imprint in the heart, it's like it's not a lure that we even have to chase. It's like if we stop efforting, there's a current that naturally draws awareness back to it. We realize it's actually more of an effort to run from it. And so just being there with that and going, what's deeply real and relevant and true in my heart, and getting to know it. So yeah, lots of time for heartfulness.
I'm really excited for everyone who gets to receive and experience that. The other thing that you mentioned that I think, especially if someone is new or just dabbling their toes into spirituality, practice, meditation, you mentioned the therapeutic application of. And so what does this specifically mean for the way that you are curating this, offering this when we say it's a therapeutic application?
Yeah, great question. I know so there's going to be people who have been meditating for a long time, and it's going to be relevant for them because it'll be different. I guarantee it'll be different than anything they've done before. The cool thing is people who have not meditated much, like when we talked about the teacher training, it was always a prerequisite to 2 years consistent self-practice before. But people who have never practiced, this is going to be so highly relevant for them because of the way the information is presented, and there's recordings to follow along with after every session. So they don't have to have a baseline of self-practice to be able to lead themselves through anything in particular. And it's going to be super simple, but very practically relevant to the things they're facing in their own life. That's what I mean by therapeutic, meaning we're not looking at how do you go off to a monastery and develop a disciplined meditation practice to try to gain enlightenment or samadhi or nirvana. It's like so many people are drawn to that idea as a means by which they can avoid the challenges that are actually in their life. And what I want to do is go, those challenges, you actually were given the tools with your mind, the power, and the ability to change them, to transform, to transcend them. You're not a victim of them, even if it feels that way, even if it has felt that way for a long time. You're not. So I want to run into them and go, this thing that's ruling my life, I'm taking ownership. And I know how I want my life to look. And there's really simple daily application of tools that can help me with that. I get so lit up even talking about it. Like to be able to feel like I could help someone in that situation is just, it's beyond. I love it. So the therapeutic aspect just means what's real for someone. And how do I apply meditation to that? And how can it help with that? How do I change my neurology? How do I change the way my brain is wired so I can think in a different way? How do I use my mind to change my brain to change my mind, as Rick Hanson says? So that's the therapeutic aspect.
Super cool. I think simplicity is often overlooked and actually something so sweet to receive. And I feel like the more that we can allow it to apply to life, where it is really where we find tangible meaning, or we feel the desire to this. So I think that's incredible. When does the course begin, and what are some of the logistics for those that are feeling the tickle of interest?
Yes. So it begins on the 6th of March. And we're recording this in 2024 for any future dwellers. And we'll probably run the course again. So the easiest way is just look at our website, kingsmeditationandmentoring.com. But this one, for whoever listens to this right away, is 6th of March, and it will be open for registration right up to the last minute. It goes for 3 months, and it's a weekly meeting, weekly online meeting. So once a week for 3 months, 12 sessions. And if you can't make it live, just watch the recordings. Every session will have the relevant meditation and audio practices, and we'll also have online groups to be able to support each other and answer questions, and with all the stuff we're going through as well. And there's some like preliminary stuff, like a short course on how to breathe and a few other things to make it all encompassing. And then for the people that are interested in facilitating meditation, either one-on-one or in groups, the way we're doing it now is this Hearts on Fire course becomes a prerequisite to do the facilitator training that will come later down the track as well. So we'll take all of the information in this course and then look more specifically at how to apply it as a teacher. But I wanted to at least offer this one for people that want to be teachers and people that really just want life transformation and to learn more about meditation.
Epic. I'll put everything linked in the show notes too. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think is worth mentioning before we close?
I didn't, like when we jumped on and we said, let's just see how we go. I did not expect some of those conversations and questions, and it's been more moving and delightful than I honestly could have ever imagined. So thank you so much for having the presence and skill to be here with me and ask great questions. And I love it, and I can't honestly think of anything else or anything more to add. I feel so stoked to get to hang out and spend this time, and for people's ear holes that are going to listen, I always feel grateful for people giving us their time. It's such a cool thing. And I'll just say the only other thing I'll say is if people look through the course content and have any questions, always feel free to reach out. You can obviously just register through the website, but if people want to know more about it or curious about anything, or even just want to say g'day, then either through Insta or email, then always super happy to talk to people and meet people and things like that. So.
Thank you, Michael. And likewise, I can speak to some of the tools from my own experience, and I'm always happy to chat. And one of the things I will say that I've recognized through the training itself, and I know this is a new iteration of it, but some of the topics that you'll speak of, but the thing I've seen across the board from people is that it changes your life. And I can attest to that. It really is magnificent in the most fulfilling way. So I'm excited for those that join you. I'm so grateful for this chat always.
Thanks, Chrissie.
I'm sure there'll be more. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Big love.